We are facing a war in the demon world. It is the longest war that determined the fate of demons and humans. The great confrontation between the two races ended with the death of the Demon King at the hands of the hero Arthur's sword. It was with the death of the Demon King that peace finally arrived. But because the Empire had to face a long and difficult war, a tremendous effort was invested in nurturing talent and finding heroes for the generations to come. It was this idea that led people to create an academy that gathered talented individuals from all corners of the Empire. They created an educational institution called the Temple, the Royal Class, a special caste of students that included the geniuses among geniuses. In this class was Ludwig, a boy who had an explosive character, as well as a developed sense of justice, but who was always among the laggards. It was that sharp science fiction novel whose action took place in the temple. However, many people didn't like this creation because they said it wasn't even played worth paying attention to or looking at the rest of the author's imaginative work. It was while reading so much booing that our hero's heart simply stopped. Our hero was looking at his body, and the girl was telling him that the cardiac arrest was caused by a sudden heart attack due to a spike in blood pressure. That girl was from the Soul Management Department, the Grim Reaper, Kim. She gave our hero a document and asked him to verify its integrity, if it was written correctly there. But our hero was worried if he had really died from an attack or if he had simply read the angry comments. But the Grim Reaper didn't like any of this. She asked him to sign all the documents as soon as possible. Our hero realized that all was lost, so he had nothing to lose. He didn't even have a choice after all at that moment. He could see his own body, or rather his corpse in the chair. He even remembered that at that moment everything started to go dark before his eyes, but he couldn't think it was his last breath. He understood that his death was incredibly stupid, and Kim, who had a lot of work to do, told him to hurry up if he finally understood everything. Our hero was already in shock after such a death, and now they were asking him to make a strange decision. What Kim explained was that when someone dies to go to paradise, first they must atone for the worst sins they committed during their life, and his worst sins were starting an endless novel and writing stories with horrible scripts. He was a writer but was between second and third tier, and barely made ends meet. His new sin was how frequently and irresponsibly he wrote chapters. However, it was our hero who had the courage to create and write a new novel and publish it from a new account. The only problem was that everyone spies on their sins differently. So our hero asked Kim why being a bad writer is a sin nowadays. She in turn made a very sly face and said that as for the effect his dream had on a person, it was very small, but that action happened from time to time, and besides, to many people, our hero didn't understand the strangeness of this system, but he understood one thing. Being such an irresponsible writer would have to atone for his sins by choosing one of his finished novels and randomly reborn as one of its heroes, and he had to stay alive until the end. But as soon as they told him this, our hero became incredibly furious. He thought such punishment was very similar to simply going to hell, but Kim, we thought it would be easier for him because he would know everything in advance, and thought he would be rewarded instead of punished. However, our hero thought it all depended on the story he got into. No matter how hard he tried to write a good story, all his novels were far from a happy ending. His first novel was City of the Dead, a story about a zombie apocalypse, and our hero was sure he would be devoured on the first day. His next job was Surviving in the Ruins, a story about surviving in an apocalyptic world, but what chance would he have being just a statistic? His third job was The Hunter Becomes the Manager, a modern action story about hunters, and he wouldn't even have enough time. He would definitely be a minor character who would be ruined. On the first day of his fourth creation, it was the miracle of the game becoming reality, and he was just a janitor. It was a fantasy novel based on dungeon games whose description said that 99.9% of people die in the process since the game takes control of reality. However, at that moment our hero didn't care because it was his novel, where he was sure he would die, but he understood there was no other choice. Finally, looking at the fifth creation titled The Death of the Demon King, he realized it was the daily life story of studying at the academy, whose action took place in a fantasy world. It was his only way to survive all his incredibly depressing efforts, but still he thought that, since it was just a nice daily life story after he himself had died reading the comments about it, it was a novel, where the chance of dying was incredibly small. And the final boss dies at the beginning of the story. He was the one who triggered the events that followed. He knew he couldn't improve it because everything would be decided by chance. He didn't even expect to get the protagonist role, so he would have to endure being absolutely any student. But what they didn't like about the manga, he understood the problem was probably the second part. But at that moment Kim said our hero had to hurry or else she would make the decision for him. She liked his work, City of the Dead, Our hero understood that subtle hint, so he said he wanted to go to the destruction of the Demon King. Kim said if that was the case, then good luck to him, and applauded. Our hero immediately found himself in the game. He couldn't understand where he was, or why he had horns, or what kind of clothes he was wearing. However, at that very moment, he realized he was already in his novel. Our hero realized that at this very moment, he was inside it, even without any kind of warning from Kim. He touched his chest, and a status window appeared in front of him. He thought to himself, what a cliché kind of development this is. But when he looked through the window, he read that he was junior of Val, and upon reading and understanding what he had read, he realized he had become the same low-ranking Demon King in his own novel where he had been exterminated. He wanted to calm down because he wasn't supposed to have a character like that. He didn't understand what sound he heard behind the window, but at that very moment his window was shattered by an explosion. A message board appeared in front of our hero saying the prologue event had started. His mission was simply to escape the castle and hear the reward. 100 achievement points in a room. Our hero started to get more and more dizzy, but after gathering his thoughts, he concluded that he had been able to be reborn in his own novel, The Death of the Demon King, which he himself had chosen. However, as a result of a random selection, he ended up in the middle of the Demon King's castle being torn to pieces, even entering as a character who wasn't even in his novel. He was 17 years old in the game, and didn't even have fighting skills. He found himself in the place where the Demon King is killed at the beginning, and he became his son. It was our hero who became the son of Val, the prince of the destroyed Demon Kingdom. Our hero kept running but understood that Kim had tricked him because he didn't know why he had gotten exactly that character. He had deceived her because he didn't know why he had been assigned that exact character. However, he still understood that the hero was in the middle of the final battle with the Demon King. This is the scene from the prologue of his new novel, The Fall of the Demon King in the novel. Both were supposed to die there, and the war ended with humanity's victory, but he had become a demon prince, which meant that if they caught him, he would definitely die. He decided he had to think of something else, like surviving. In this situation, after all, the task board kept advancing behind him, but in the novel that didn't happen, judging by the overused status window. That's where his traits were prescribed. He didn't understand them, but realized those numbers were far from excellent data, and it would have been much better if he had been reborn as the final boss, the Demon King himself, because that way he could escape or find a compromise. It would have been better than dying now. He didn't even have special skills to help him survive. But there was still one skill left, the ability to read the language of his world, so he could only hope to find something in the vault. But when he entered, he found nothing interesting. He didn't understand why there was only junk there. He even realized that was the only reason they had lost to the Imperial Army. But at one point he found a magic book. He was pleasantly surprised because it had been added, especially for those who didn't know how to use magic. He found it right away because he was hoping to find a spell that would let him get out of that tough situation he was in. But his happiness overflowed when, at one point, he found it. He could find a teleportation spell. However, judging by the noise outside the door, our hero knew he had to get out as soon as possible. He tried to use teleportation, but it didn't work. He didn't understand what had happened. However, at that very moment, he received a message that he couldn't teleport due to a magical barrier. Our hero suddenly felt bad. He thought he was going to die, and didn't even have time to find something useful. But flipping another page, he noticed a very strange spell, the reincarnation spell. Our hero used this spell on himself immediately, and right away, he transformed into a human-like entity. Our hero, even after casting this spell on himself, couldn't imagine if it would work or if they would catch him immediately, but he still understood it was the only thing he could try. His plan was simple. First reincarnate as a human, then infiltrate the prison cell to escape with the other prisoners, thanks to the Imperial Army, and then just find a way to escape, quickly. This would be the best escape plan to achieve with the Imperial Army's help. He hoped he hadn't chosen the wrong door, but he noticed a strange smell and then realized it was blood, and he had stepped on a hand. Our hero started screaming because it was a real hand under him, and there was real blood on his hands. He didn't understand how everyone was dead. That wasn't written in his story. Everything he had written was supposed to be a normal novel. Suddenly he noticed someone alive in front of him. He asked if the person was alive, if they were okay. Our hero approached and noticed it was just a little girl. He told her not to be afraid, because he was also a prisoner. Our hero looked and realized the situation was very strange, because she was probably sitting on her mother. He even told her not to worry, that help would arrive soon. But after looking at her, he realized he had crossed a line, because she was scared too. Then our hero said there was nothing to worry about, that they were in the Demon King's castle. He asked if she thought it would be better to stay together. She looked at him silently and smiled, but after a pause she started crying. Our hero began to worry, and immediately apologized. He didn't want that, but despite that, she said it was okay, that he could sit next to her. Our hero sat down but still felt uncomfortable, and the girl said he seemed too calm, so our hero had to pretend to be worried. However, our hero said he wasn't lying, that he was really scared, because if his plan failed, he would be caught and killed, but he had no other choice. So if he failed, so be it. Our hero touched his coat and realized there was something in it. He saw cookies, remembered he had put them in his pocket, and looked at her. He wasn't hungry but looked at her and asked if she wanted something to eat. He looked at her and couldn't get excited. He was about to say help would arrive soon, but at that very moment some people arrived and said they had found the prison. Our hero understood that they were all the ones he had been waiting for. They had finally arrived. Our hero looked at them and couldn't understand why there was such a reaction toward those who had just found the prison. But at that same moment, one of the men knelt and said he was very sorry he hadn't been able to save him sooner. He looked back and didn't understand if the girl sitting behind him was the princess. It was then that we realized she was the first princess of the Cardius Empire, Charlotte of Cardius. But the same crash event from the prologue was complete for our hero. It was at that moment, when our hero gained 100 achievement points, then everything happened at the Imperial Army camp. Our hero thought that fortunately he had managed to save himself along with the princess, because it was thanks to her that it turned out to be a good decision. But now he was in a desperate situation. After all, he and the princess, whom he saved thanks to a high society man, were still demons pretending to be ordinary men using a low-rank reincarnation spell. If the princess mage said inappropriately, they could be subject to the Demon King's curse and take advantage of the dispersion, then he would be dead. Besides, the princess told everyone to take care of our hero because he was the one who saved her. The princess began to worry too much about him. In short, our hero receives too much attention and wants to escape secretly. But there was something our hero couldn't have expected. A princess was sitting in front of him, one who wasn't a character in his novel at all. She was the one not mentioned even a single word. The princess was approached by the Knight Lens, who told her they were in a military camp, but the princess had already had enough of that. Lens also said that as soon as the Duke of Solarian arrived, they would go straight to the Imperial Palace. She immediately turned to our hero and thanked him for the incident at the prison. Our hero didn't see that he had done anything useful for her, so he asked what he had done that was so helpful. But the princess told him that even if he thought otherwise, she believed he had helped her a lot. She also said that as a token of gratitude, she would make sure our hero arrived, being safe and sound at his home. However, our hero didn't understand how that would happen through the city and what home. He couldn't remember the name of any street, but at that moment our hero got worried because he felt someone was watching him. He looked up and saw Lens staring at him intently. Our hero knew immediately he had to think, because he looked at him as if he was going to cut off his head, and if he was going to delay his answer, he had to think of something. But the princess made a strange face immediately, so our hero couldn't even believe how silly she looked. She looked at our hero and said that probably he had had to go through a lot. Our hero praised fate, because he was very lucky that she was so reliable. Then at that very moment the princess said through tears that with all her strength she would help him recover for his memories. Our hero adored her, but Lens warned him that this kind of promise had to be kept. The princess said she had said everything out loud, so that everything would be fine. Lens thought the princess was a liar, who wanted to make her look like a liar. Lens said no, but the hero only thought that he was grateful for that promise, but that she would not be able to fulfill it. Because death awaited the princess, it was not mentioned even once. The actual conditions of the prison cells in the Demon King's castle, so the backstory that he did not know must have been generated automatically to establish the order and plausibility of this world. So most likely, the existence of the princess is one of the results of that world generation. Exactly. Our hero knows nothing about his future even though he is the author of this novel, but knowing that Bertus was created by him, he would never allow any rivalry if it were about succession to the throne. Our hero thanked the princess again, but understood that the innocent girl who had no idea what awaited her in the future would not be ready for such competition, and our hero's life was on the edge, so there was nothing he could do about it. He simply considered himself useless to society. Our hero couldn't believe what was going through his head. How could he think like that? He couldn't just leave such an innocent girl. He wanted to warn her because her life was in danger. In other words, if he managed to get her on his side, he would give her a helping hand even if something unexpected happened. But the princess decided to break the silence, saying she seemed to have indigestion from so much food. She even asked to see a doctor. Lens wanted to stop her because he wanted to keep her safe, but the princess said there was no chance of danger because she had discovered that the Demon King was dead. Len said no but went to find a doctor. As soon as Len left, the princess turned to our hero and said she would start by apologizing. Our hero was very surprised because she immediately became a different person. It was like she had completely changed, but the princess said that because of him, our hero would die. Our hero was shocked, but the princess kept drinking her tea and said she couldn't hide all the details about her family, but that there was a high probability she would be murdered in the near future if nothing was done. However, her killer would be her half-brother Bertus. Most people in that camp were probably their enemies, and the fact that they kept her inside without letting her leave meant they were not going to deliver her message. Our hero also thought that if he reflected on it, when they were rescued, she was covered with a thick cloak, and probably people didn't know that among the prisoners in the Demon King's castle, maybe everyone had orders to kill her. They could poison her, and then say they found her body in the Demon King's castle. If she died that way, that would be the end of our hero. They would erase him the same way to cover their tracks. In other words, they would kill them both. Our hero asked if they could ask the knights for help, but she said it was useless, because there was no one she could trust. Our hero put his hands on his head, because if all this was true, even that night Len would be his enemy, which meant he would be checkmated. But the princess told him not to worry, because she was the one who made promises in her own name. She would help our hero despite what had happened. She would help him remember his memories. Then she said they should run away. Our hero was very scared and confused, but the princess kept saying he was just distracting them. However, at that moment, our hero had no choice but to obey. He didn't even have time to think, but still, the question of what had happened to his novel didn't leave his mind. He remembered at that moment only one thing: the princess's words, who said that her life was only in our hero's hands. He entered the tent, but there was no one there, although he remained puzzled by the fact that he had been given such an important mission immediately. Once again, we saw how they perceived the conversation between our hero and the princess. The conditions were such that there was only one way out of there, simply to escape. They had to bring Cyrus Francis here. Our hero remembered that person, but asked who Fritz was and apologized because our hero had to catch up. He asked if she remembered the knight who had saved his life in the dungeons. She said William Francis is one of the few representatives of the neutral faction who is loyal only to the imperial family. Our hero decided to ask her if that meant he was someone who could be trusted. However, he asked what would happen if he was already on the side of the Empire's prince. The princess said something quite chilling. She said that if that had happened, he would have killed them in the castle, but that night Francis had saved them. He was a great knight, and undoubtedly loyal to the imperial family. Our hero, however, realized that if there really was someone on Charlotte's side, among the neutrals, then they were the ones who had a chance to survive. So our hero had clearly decided he would do everything Princess Charlotte told him. She was glad because if our hero trusted him, then she hoped they both would come out unscathed. But as soon as the moment came, the princess, or rather her eyes, changed immediately. She said it was time to make an escape route through strict security while pulling out a knife. Our hero asked what to do, but she immediately said she would be the decoy. Our hero got scared because he really wanted to be the decoy, but she said maybe it would be fine, at least as long as there was no one deciding his fate. Then she even took his hand and told him everything would be fine because they didn't have much time. She said this with confidence in her eyes, but her hands were trembling. But our hero thought he had no choice but to join the princess. Charlotte left the room immediately, but the knight asked her to stay inside. The princess said she just wanted to see the barracks. They told her that wasn't possible, but she said she was a princess and just wanted to see the barracks. She even asked what right they had to stop her. They were about to start talking again, but the princess pretended to be angry. She even demanded to know their names and ranks. The knights kept talking to her, but she started putting on her show again. Our hero had managed to get out but couldn't even imagine where to find that man. Our hero met a knight who asked what he was doing. Our hero immediately answered he was looking for Sir Francis, but another knight replied he had gone to the Demon King's castle. Our hero couldn't believe that it happened. Then the knight continued, saying it was Sir Lance who gave the order. He ordered him to take care of the demon remains in the castle. Our hero realized that same Lance was the terrible knight who had stood over the princess at that moment. Our hero realized they only had one option. The knight asked our hero again what questions he had for Francis, and if our hero denied it, he would simply arrest him. But our hero began to say an injustice had been committed, that Sir Francis was in danger. Our hero realized he had to make sure his plan didn't fail. He thought the knight in front of him would immediately go see Francis, but he asked what our hero was talking about. He couldn't imagine such an answer. So he said something very strange was happening. around them, and that for their own safety they should unite. He said the knight shouldn't believe the words of a stranger, but the knight said he would believe our hero. Couldn't believe it because he didn't even deserve trust, but the knight said if he had to say why, it was out of our hero's total desperation that he was willing to tell the stranger about it. He also said it was because of his hunch, and he didn't think Sir Francis suspected anything bad because when he left, he warned him that someone might approach them. Our hero couldn't believe it and wondered if Francis knew about this from the beginning when he was still in the castle. But why did Francis leave Princess Charlotte and go to the castle instead of protecting her? But the knight only asked our hero if he had ever ridden a horse. He said no. But the knight said that wasn't a problem, because he had a strong horse. He said they would let him go once, but first they had to find a horse. Our hero decided to ask him directly, but the knight said first it would be necessary to betray his name. It was Darus. At one point, our hero was already riding his horse. While riding, he heard that many demons were simply imprisoned. He couldn't understand where they had come from. Our hero wondered what they were doing on that road. Darus said they were prisoners. Our hero hadn't forgotten that the war had just ended, so if they were trapped there, they were most likely defeated soldiers or common demons. But they were still exploring the area closest to the castle. As soon as they returned to headquarters, they would be executed immediately. But Darus said there was nothing to worry about. However, our hero wondered what would have happened if he had made a mistake. But Darus did arrive at the castle. He said there was a high alert zone. Our hero and Darus had just gotten off their horses when they were seen by other knights who asked who they were. But at that moment the knight and our hero identified themselves. He said he was Lieutenant Darus, the leader of his battalion. The knights listened and understood. Then they asked what brought them there. Darus said immediately that our hero wanted to send a message to Franz, which was why he had brought him there. The knight was very surprised by this information, but Darus said that because the information was too personal, he would prefer to give it to the Lynchos. But the knights said they had just received a message, saying that Franz was dead, because he had died fighting against the demon resistance. Our hero was shocked by this and very worried, because now there was no one by the princess's side who could protect her, not even Charlotte. The knights asked if there was anything they should know, but Darus said the information was only for Franz. Upon hearing this, the knight left immediately and told them to return to their post, because that place was definitely not for outsiders. Our hero had his head in his hands and was very scared. He assured himself that he knew luck would not be on his side. However, our hero realized that it was most likely a deception because Bertie just wanted to get rid of Charlotte. He was trying to hide the fact that she had survived the Demon King's castle. In fact, according to Charlotte, he would try to erase her traces even if it meant killing everyone who knew the truth about her being alive. That's why he immediately targeted Franz. After all, he had brought him to the Demon King's castle, and they killed him. He remembered Charlotte's pretty face and decided to think again, because just thinking about it, it wasn't necessary to give up immediately. But at that very moment, Darus asked him to tell the whole truth because surely there was another reason why our hero had said that Franz was in danger, and that the princess had something to do with all this. Our hero wondered if he could really trust Darus after all. According to the princess, most of the military were on Prince Bertie's side, so he couldn't say for sure if Bertie had also recruited a low-ranking officer like Darus, but he knew there was no one else he could trust. So it was at that moment when our hero lifted his head and decided to tell Darus the whole truth, even how he had been held hostage with the princess, and how Sir Franz had saved them. At that very moment Franz thought that if our hero spoke like that, it was most likely that Franz would have been killed by knights, instead of being killed by demons, so he asked if our hero wanted to save the princess. Our hero swallowed the saliva in his throat and said yes. Darus thought about it and said he would help our hero, wondered if he really would. But Darus said he would because he was a member of France. Our hero was glad, although he didn't fully trust him, but still he would help them escape. Darus immediately turned around and left, saying that if they had nothing else to do in the castle they should hurry to find the princess. Our hero looked at the castle and immediately said he had a plan. Our hero offered to check the demon stuff, which Sir Darus appreciated. However, as soon as they entered, they noticed a looted warehouse. Darus thought the knight had done it all, but our hero understood that he had done everything, said it was most likely they would find something interesting and useful there, but Darus kept calling the demons trash, since they had looted all the warehouses after killing their king. However, somehow our hero decided to check the stuff. He had already been there, so he pretended to find something interesting. He found a teleportation scroll that he immediately showed to Darus. Our hero offered to take some of them because they would be useful at some point, and said he could even find a magic book. Darus began to wonder, how could our hero know where all the scrolls were? But he was just a hostage. As soon as our hero put all the scrolls away, He immediately said it was time to move. They were about to take the path that our hero wanted to follow, but at that very moment Darius said it was too dangerous there, and he didn't want to make noise. He said someone was there, and it turned out to be another group of knights, who had seen our heroes enter the castle. Darius said they were the knights of the Solarian Duchy. Our hero realized it would be very hard to get out, because the force behind Bertus's mother was also one of the strongest noble families in the empire. He wanted to put Bertus on the throne, so most of the knights of the Solarian Duchy were not common knights by birth, but from the highest ranks with noble titles. Our hero understood that he was writing about this in a disturbing way, just like the murder of Franz, who didn't want to obey Bertus. So probably what happened was like in the book. The knights couldn't find the heroes, although they didn't care. Our hero wondered how long they could wait, but one of the knights could see them through the stone. He even said he could hear them breathe at first. Our hero thought it was some kind of bluff, but as soon as the knight drew his sword and headed toward the stone, it became clear to everyone that they really could see them. The knight looked at the heroes and said the princess was really pathetic for sending her subordinates to their death. At the same time, Darius responded that he was a complete bastard for daring to lay a hand on the princess. But the knight didn't have time to argue, because he thought all his words were nonsense. He also said he wouldn't like to kill a common civilian, but it was all for the future of the empire. Darius stepped forward and told him to step aside, but our hero was worried, because he feared he had spent too much energy to get out of the castle, and now he was there again. He wondered if they would really kill him there, but he certainly didn't like the idea. But at one moment our hero noticed that the stone statue of the Gargo had come to life. He knew that in many games this happened at the most unexpected moment, and right then he attacked the entire group of knights. But our hero couldn't believe that as soon as he thought about it, it immediately happened. Darius said he had no idea what had happened, but it was their chance to just escape. Our hero and Darius immediately went outside and got on the dog. Darius asked our hero why the statue had started moving spontaneously, but our hero had to lie again, saying he didn't know anything, because when he transferred to his new body, he had noticed he had some kind of demonic power that immediately overflowed in a general skill assessment like a king. A low-ranking demon, he was even pretty sure he had awakened that statue, unconsciously, with the demonic power skill. He even hoped that Darius wouldn't doubt him over something so small. However, Darius was focused on something completely different. He said that he and our hero needed to get out of there unharmed as soon as possible, but as he turned around, he saw crowds of enemies approaching. He couldn't understand how they had managed to catch up to them in the first place, nor why there were so many. But in a moment, our hero told Darius to stay calm immediately. Our hero looked in the spellbook and used an acceleration spell. He decided that for now, enough would be simply getting away from the pursuers. He was glad they had sped up, but Darius couldn't believe he knew how to use magic. He was already happy because they couldn't do much since they were at a distance, but while he was saying these words, an arrow flew toward his cheek. Our hero realized that because they had crossbows, they couldn't just stay back, so he decided he needed to think of a way to get rid of all the knights at once. Probably, our hero had found a foolproof option for himself, and at that moment, Darius wondered if he really had magic in his hands now, but he was sure such magic wouldn't work against such strong knights. Our hero knew this because he was writing about it. He understood it would be uninteresting to read the novel if mages were stronger than knights. He simply said he wouldn't use his spell on the knights, but would use it on another creature while casting his spell. He couldn't believe how his own creation could hurt him now, but the spell was already ready. He immediately activated it on the horses. He understood that the magic didn't just affect the knights, so the illusion would definitely help. All the knights started falling off their horses, because something strange began happening to them. He started using spell after spell so that there was nothing anyone could do about it. He liked it because if he could get rid of two more, they would have better chances. At that moment, our hero wanted to look for the mind control scroll but couldn't find it. He felt annoyed, but the information that his horse was exhausted was even worse, and the knights were already behind him. But when he looked toward the forest, he saw the demons that had survived. He realized they had been captured after their defeat, but right at that moment, our hero had a strange feeling, the same feeling he had when he was able to control the gargoyles. He thought about it subconsciously, so the biggest demon lunged toward them. Darius got scared because he thought they were about to die, but that demon passed right by them. The knights saw all this and couldn't understand how their allies couldn't handle the common demons that were under their control. Our hero asked Darius to step aside, and he thought he was right, because the demonic power, commoners who were under his control. Our hero asked Darius to step aside, and he thought he was right because the demonic power was also working in his favor, but Darius couldn't understand how. Every time they found themselves cornered, something helped them immediately. However, he understood that there was no need to suspect our hero, because first they had to save the little people. As soon as Darius and our hero arrived at the camp, they were received near the princess's room, but the knight didn't want to let them in, so Darius said it was time to put the plan into motion, and at that very moment, Darius's sword stabbed the knight directly in the neck. Everyone noticed what was happening, so Darius ordered our hero to go after the princess. Our hero entered her room, where 2 churchmen were with her. Charlotte was surprised to see him, but our hero only asked her to close her eyes and immediately used the flash spell. Everyone went blind, but our hero took Charlotte's hand and used mass teleportation to the capital of the Guardian Empire. Once again, after that, our hero passed the test. He received information that changed the course of events, and thanks to him, an important character, who didn't even exist in the main story, survived. Charlotte Cardius. She even managed to gain 1,000 experience points, and the prologue was completed. Once our hero arrived at the capital of the Guardian Empire, he realized that this was the place where the main plot of the novel he had written took place. Of course, for the Guardian base, he took his hometown, that is, Seoul, and thanks to teleportation, they could be there since the main events of the story took place in that city, which he personally hated. He thought he would have to be there, but he was wrong because he would never have described such a huge city in so much detail. However, our hero regained his composure and realized that now was not the time to activate Thor mode, but Charlotte was very excited. She couldn't understand what was happening, because they had just been at the camp, and now they were already in the palace. Our hero understood that she was confused, so he apologized for not having had time to explain anything and told her that as soon as they arrived at King Franz's castle, he was already dead. At that moment, Charlotte asked if that meant they were in the capital only because of our hero and his strength. But he replied that it wasn't like that because at that moment Sir Cyrus appeared, who had been close to dying. Our hero asked if he wasn't hurt, to which he replied that if they had waited a little longer, they surely would have died. It was then that he realized that plan B was that Daru was simply delaying things and creating a commotion while our hero simply escaped with Charlotte. Only then did Darius use the scroll. Our hero understood that they were very lucky because they had 2 scrolls. Otherwise Darius would have died too. Charlotte looked at him and asked, "And what is Darius like?" He talked about himself, but the most important thing was that he was happy to serve him. He even asked permission to give a report. It was after that they didn't stay still, and he began to tell everything gradually, from Cyrus's death, Franz, and the infiltration into the Demon King's castle, to how they almost died chasing the knights. However, he didn't understand how by chance the gargoyle got rid of some of the knights. It was also quite by chance that one of the captive demons started to rage and gave them time during their escape, that they conveniently could reach the capital, thanks to the teleportation scrolls they found in the demonic castle. Everything seemed very strange. Even our hero would have sensed something weird. But the fact that everything was a consequence of their decisions was what made him most suspicious. Even such a reckless princess began to understand everything, and our hero himself understood that certainly it would be difficult for him to take his own word after all. It was Charlotte who had gone through the hellish intrigues of the skill. However, our hero decided not to think about it anymore, because if he stayed close to the princess, he would definitely meet his end. He stopped so that the princess and Darius would be ahead. He knew that was his only chance to escape, but also, he knew the whole situation was really strange. After all, even after having saved the princess and being on the brink of death, no one would give him a reward. Only a man as weak and hungry as our hero at that moment simply sat down and asked for money for food. And if he had known this could happen, he would have added mana to the demons. But as soon as he thought about it, it appeared immediately, the announcement about the world-setting change. From that moment on, all demons could feed on mana. However, for this ability, our hero needed to have 100,000 experience points. Our hero saw another message that said he now had the right to intervene in the novel's rules. The death of the Demon King began to receive message after message. But in 1.1, a message caught his attention. He received a list of trials. He looked at them, but there were very strange tasks like going to prison or offering a tribute to the emperor, and a list of what he could improve or preview, like the ability to see how actions would decide fate. However, not everything could work, and everything he added to this world could not be removed. Our hero didn't understand why everything was so difficult, but at that moment, everything became much easier for him. First, he couldn't directly affect world events. Second, intervening in key plot moments wouldn't work. And third, he couldn't use abilities that would break his world. In the end, the hero got angry but needed to calm down. Because even though everything seemed complicated, this was his salvation. He had very few experience points, but decided to see what else the game offered him. He looked and saw a reward called the Writer's Advice that was worth 150 points. He wondered what it could be, but the vague advice seemed strange to him. So he decided to search, and found clear advice, telling him to go to the magic item shop. That's what he thought at first. He couldn't believe it because the game had forced him to sell his magic book to get some food, and just to make money. However, it seemed to him that this solution would solve all his problems, but as soon as he went to the shop, one of the vendors, and showed the scrolls to the clerk and the other people, everyone told him everything he had was trash. Everyone thought what our hero offered was a scam, or that he was trying to cheat them with fake medals. But he was surprised that they had told him to go to the magic shop. But when he went to another magic shop, he only thought about having enough money for food. However, one of the vendors asked him to redraw the scroll they had given him. Our hero looked at it and saw it should be a fireball. They told him he was pretty good at drawing, so they offered to split the profits 50-50, and if our hero could do everything by the next day, they would pay him. Our hero didn't like that everyone thought everything he offered was fake, but when he went out to the street, he couldn't understand who would use 5 silver coins. He preferred to sell them, but wasn't sure if he could redraw even one scroll, and what would happen to the man who tried to use it at the most critical moment. Our hero was already exhausted. However, it was still very strange that no one could recognize the value of those scrolls. Our hero thought they might be rare, but he went to the last magic item shop. He thought if he couldn't sell them there, he would end up expecting nothing. But when he entered, he didn't see anyone. He thought the people were very careless. But a woman appeared behind him and asked if he was looking for a potion or a scroll. But our hero only wanted to sell the scroll. She asked if no one had taught him that it was wrong to deceive adults. She said she normally didn't buy that kind of stuff, but he could pay him 2 gold coins for them because he didn't want him wandering the streets with those scrolls. But as soon as he took them in his hands, he asked our hero to tell him the truth about where he had gotten those scrolls because it was a magic formula that demons use. He placed his hands on our hero's shoulders and asked why he needed them. Our hero was very worried because he thought he had reached the end once again. He knew magic existed, but he couldn't say for sure how it existed. He hadn't even described in his novel how it worked or what exactly caused it. That meant he couldn't identify the demonic magic formula for sure, and since all the sellers weren't magicians, they didn't know anything about it and couldn't confuse their scrolls with something real. But it was this girl who could recognize the demonic formula. Our hero immediately said it would be in his own interest. She repeated her question about where he had gotten the book. Our hero looked at her and couldn't understand why she had latched onto him so tightly, like a leech. But our hero stepped back and asked if the information window could make the girl with so many questions leave him alone, but that would require 3,000 experience points. Our hero argued with the window, so the girl asked what he was doing. Our hero didn't know whether to tell her everything or not, so he just told her he had found it in the Demon King's castle. But that didn't make her happy, so she started approaching him again. Our hero immediately said he would explain everything, but after explaining himself, she told him she didn't believe him because if he really had saved the princess, he surely would have been rewarded or granted a noble title. Our hero tried to prove he wasn't lying, because when they fled, they were attacked by knights, and there was a high chance that Prince Bertus tried to kill him. It sounded too good to be true for the girl, so she decided to believe him. Our hero wiped the sweat from his forehead and realized that being a liar had its advantages, but the girl smiled and said that since the Demon King had died, everything was fine. She started smiling and said they must have been very excited about everything, so she asked him to let her comfort him. She approached our hero and hugged him, which he really liked. Our hero had tried to keep the image of a sufferer, but he felt uncomfortable and just wanted to eat. But at one point the girl said that if he had been in the Demon King's castle, then he was under a curse and asked permission to lift it. Our hero didn't understand, but it was already too late. She was in front of him, pointing her curse at him. He knew he couldn't let her do it, because then the camouflage would break, the dispersion, it would happen, and our hero would start transforming back into his true form. He tried to explain everything, but at that moment the girl knelt before him, asked if he remembered her. She had also removed her camouflage, and turned out to be a vampire, to our hero's surprise. She asked if he really didn't remember anything, and although the vampire was surprised by such a twist, she told him to leave because they could be seen. She asked him to go to her room on the 2nd floor and continue the conversation there. Our hero didn't understand what was happening. As soon as he and the vampire sat down, she offered him a snack. So when our hero sat down to eat a sandwich, she asked him, again, if he had really lost all his memory. He replied that he had forgotten absolutely everything. except that he was a prince. The vampire said that would be better for them, because he had come straight to her with that scroll. However, she realized she hadn't introduced herself yet, so she said her name was Aloris, and that she was a member of the demon army's implementation squad of Guardium. From now on would serve our hero. Our hero didn't understand anything, because even this hadn't been added to his story, but he asked her what a vampire was doing in such a sunny place and among people. She just answered that she lived in the shop to save on rent and that she had no other choice. But there was something else he needed to know. There were 2 more demons in the capital besides him. One of them hid under the identity of Kondergan Pomfi, a transformation demon. The other lived near the Bronze Gates Bridge on the shore of the Aran Sarkagar River. Who was the one who kidnapped the princess? He is the best master of transformation magic. That's why he was able to penetrate so easily. Our hero decided to ask about the other one, because it was already clear why he should be careful with the transformation demon. But Irene, on the other hand, controls a faction that terrifies all of Guardium. Thanks to her talent for hand-to-hand combat, she was able to create almost an entire army. Our hero realized that all the members of the squad who would serve him were incredibly strong. He understood that she was the leader of the gang. But how had she gotten the money? The answer that she sold sweets didn't satisfy him. Our hero simply didn't expect it. But the vampire asked him if he really hadn't eaten anything, although she was still glad he had survived, because now there would be a chance to rebuild the world. But our hero said he wasn't ready to rebuild the demon world, because if they decided to attack humans again, everything would happen all over again. He knew that gathering the demons was the same as sending them to their death. The vampire shouted that he should, like a king, restore the demons, but our hero was convinced that the time of the demons had come to an end, and he didn't want to become the leader of a nation that no longer existed. He asked her to stop acting like a servant. She remained silent at first, but then apologized. Our hero must be exhausted, so she asked him to rest. Our hero wanted to stop her. He thought it was too much, but he even thought she was happy for a moment. However, what the hell was going on? Our hero was lying in bed looking at the vampire. He liked her a lot, so he asked her a question. What was she like before? The vampire immediately began to stammer and say that he was the greatest, but she realized that wasn't true, so she decided to turn around and said she would go to sleep. Now, because tomorrow there would be a meeting with the other squad members. Our hero had asked where she would sleep, but at that moment he realized he had made a fatal mistake. In his bed at that moment was the incredibly beautiful vampire. He couldn't believe this could happen, because until that moment he thought, and was sure that his rebirth was a living hell. But in moments like this, he really enjoyed everything. So morning came and our hero, along with the vampire, set out on their way. The entire capital was in tears due to such an unusual event. The resurrected princess, the death of a hero, and the death of a demon. But of course, everyone was happy because finally the war that had cost so many lives was over. Everyone was shouting, whether for the princess or the hero. They were really fed up with all these wars. And while he listened, our hero, instead of joining the feast, headed toward the monument train in the Oligar district. After that, they headed south, toward the Bronze Gates on Irene's coast. Thanks to Haya's strength, they didn't have to walk from Johnson Station to the express bus terminals, nor stroll through the hanging Vampo Park. However, once our hero arrived at the place, he saw the whole essence of the bottom of the Bronze Gate. Our hero compared this place to a dump, that is, a place where there wasn't a single decent person. Well, Haya said there was nothing that could be done about it. Since they were going to meet the queen of the place, they headed to the sewer where Irene was sitting. She was near the fire, but as soon as she smelled a familiar scent, our hero and Elaine walked through the sewer. She asked him to be careful with his feet because it was easy to slip there. But at that moment, Irene caught the scent of laughter at that moment. Lollard, as he was called, knelt down and told her he was also a member of the same team that had infiltrated the Empire. Our hero was glad to meet her, but he thought that instead there should have been some muscular jerk. At the same time, while trying to organize his thoughts, Olai and Loya were arguing about where the third member was, but Haya said he was too busy. However, they still had a bigger problem. Their master, who had lost all his memory, except that he was a prince. She said all that was fine, but no one should understand it. Then Loya said that when he still remembered everything, he used to make her lift her shirt and bark like a dog. She found it embarrassing, and our hero found it a little strange but probably would like to do it again. Olai laughed at her. Maybe he even liked it, but Loya didn't want to show it with her whole appearance and was too embarrassed. Our hero realized how silly he had been and apologized to Loya, but still, he said they had to end all relations. In fact, everything that was in the past should stay there. He wanted to shake her hand, But at that moment War thought it was a team, so he shook her hand, but like a dog. When he understood the situation, he immediately withdrew it. Well, I like this whole show, she thought. She even thought that War had already developed his instincts. She immediately apologized to our hero because she didn't even want to think about it. But he said he would be more careful next time. Then they started hearing a strange voice. At that moment, the third member of the team was running through the sewer, shouting that he was very happy to see his lord and even crashed into him. He said he was so excited that he couldn't wait to find him and meet him. But our hero at that moment was choking because apparently the old man was very heavy. It was the same demon Zark. He was on top of our hero, begging through tears to free this world from all the unpleasant people. But while still gasping, our hero remembered Haya's words, who had told him to be careful because Zark was the most loyal to the Demon King and was willing to sacrifice everything to restore the demon world to its former glory. Our hero looked at him, or rather, looked at the old man who was crying as they pulled him away. But as soon as everyone calmed down, they sat by the fire. Zark asked our hero to restore everything that people had ruined, because it was impossible to forgive them for everything. He also said it was worth avenging the last Demon King and making it much more majestic. But Loya wasn't so happy with all that talk. She simply asked Zark to shut up. Our hero, on the other hand, set conditions. He said he would rebuild the demon empire but that he was a useless child. Zark was furious. He couldn't believe his master's words. He said our hero would be the one standing over the corpses of his enemies. Our hero asked him to stop, but he asked why. Because he was the archdemon. Why was he called that? Everyone fell silent, but Zark wanted to show his knowledge. But Alessia, with a serious face, said that in the dark lands, where they called home, there was a ruthless war and rivers of blood flowed endlessly. Many years ago, humans had started forming a government to fix it, but despite all their attempts to unite with them or with other races, all the demons kept fighting each other, until one day a demon appeared to stop the endless war. He was the one who invaded the minds of the demons, which is why he was given the status of archdemon. As a sign of recognition later, this title came to be used by all the demons' descendants. Our hero understood that this is why the archdemons are important, but still decided to ask what Zark's plan was. Said that our hero would have to become much stronger than he is now, because he would have to return to the ancient lands and unite all the demons again. But our hero thought it was a too risky plan, since they were now right in the heart of enemy territory. In the Empire's capital, our hero wanted to learn about the people's culture, and then build a strategy. But immediately she lit up. She said that was exactly what she expected from him. She couldn't stop crying seeing how brave our hero was, but our hero had only understood that it would be more convenient to live in a city than in forests or similar places. So at that moment Zark even suggested an idea. He suggested our hero join the temple. Our hero couldn't understand if Zark was crazy, but after looking he saw that he already had the support of the Hoyar. He wanted to stop them, but they kept hinting that he could become very strong at that academy since they taught heroes there. He wanted to use less help, but she was impatient to see our hero there. She was very excited. She liked the idea. Our hero was stunned by this news, and asked what would happen if everyone knew his identity. But Zark told him not to worry. He took a ring off his finger and gave it to our hero. He told him that thanks to the Dreadfind ring he could transform into anyone, and began telling him in a strange voice that the rebirth of the great empire was within reach. Our hero exclaimed that he didn't want it, but we can understand that everything was decided at that moment. Because he had to enter the temple, he was going to use the false status that had been given to him by Haya, or by Zark, but there was a chance that when the princess returned, the search for those responsible for Charlotte's kidnapping would begin, so to take action they decided to think of something better. At the same time, War entered the shop and brought someone else. She was received by a man, so she asked him to introduce someone. At that moment, Loyar introduced his trusted brother. They shook hands. But at that moment we saw our hero with white hair who called himself Reinhardt. We see again the exact moment when our hero was sitting by the fire. Haya told him that if he kept the name of the Demon King, there would be a good chance he would be unmasked. They started proposing every name. However, at that very moment, he proposed the name Reinhardt. Also, he could change his identity and appearance. At this point, he already had a false identity and a status with which he could enter the temple. Lawyer asked that man to make him an ID card, as well as simply fix his life by sending him to the temple. But the man, although he understood that everything was fine, asked how they would send him to study. At that moment, the apple War was eating fell from our hero's mouth. She couldn't understand how the tuition could be. But the man said that with their current income, they could barely cover the tuition. Our hero understood that at this point, they wouldn't even have enough money for 1 year's tuition. The temple was the most elite school on the entire continent. exactly the place where children from prestigious families were sent to study, and if they converted the cost of one school year to the world's currency, it would be about $100,000 a year. War couldn't understand if it was true that they were that poor. The man wanted to take the money from the candy shop's budget, but Loyar became very threatening. At that moment he said he had already warned them about that he had already told them if they did that, their candy shop would surely be finished. Who had already told him that if they did that, his candy shop would definitely be finished. But our hero started to get interested in all this, because he wanted to know more about all the income. Our hero said he would only have to pay for the first semester. Loyar asked if he wanted to get a scholarship, but our hero was sure that it would work like that, because since the world had lost its hero, the empire would start looking for a second and even a third one. Our hero thought that if someone showed outstanding talent or good results, the temple would cover the cost completely, and even though our hero was a low-rank demon, he was still an archdemon, and told Lawler that if he studied there for at least a year, he could definitely acquire at least one new talent. Lawler supported him, but our hero kept thinking that if everything went wrong he would use experience points and buy a system talent. However, the man immediately fell into horror because even though they had come up with a plan, they wouldn't even have enough to pay the application fee. After all, recently, at the Bronze Gates Bridge there weren't many people, so their income was gradually decreasing, but our hero started speaking in a mysterious voice, saying they could see the whole situation from another angle. The man was surprised, and said if customers didn't come to them, then they could go to the customers, to a place with an endless flow of people, a place where they could easily escape. If any problem arose, he suggested a place called Manhwa. Train. After all, if they sold toys, their parents would have no choice but to buy them for their kids who were screaming regardless of the quality of the toys. Lawler was surprised by this idea, but the man liked it immediately. He even grabbed our hero by the shoulders and told him that our hero would go far if he had such brilliant ideas in his head, so the man would surely let him go to the temple. But our hero was worried about something else. It seemed to him that Lawler had called him smart. He knew it wouldn't work that way, so he decided to give her a little lesson. He reached out his hand to her and asked if she was ready to start. Lawler got on all fours and stretched her arms like a dog. The man asked why she was like that, but she pulled our hero's hand away and said it wasn't what he thought. Our hero and the whole Lawler group were already sitting at the table drinking. Our hero drank with everyone, but the man praised him, saying he expected great rewards and was basically happy to welcome him to his new family. Everyone raised their glasses in unison, which meant that everyone was ready to accept our hero and happy to see him. It was already night when everyone had fallen asleep somewhere. Our hero and the man were still sitting safe and sound. He asked the man, whose name was David, about the gang he had mentioned before, but David explained that our hero understood what it all meant, although he didn't decide to bring it up because almost everything seemed strange to him. In fact, the main focus of their group was that their main income came from brute force, and with that money, they covered all expenses. That is, the expenses of the enforcement group, the magic shop, and a noble, but they didn't even have enough money for dinners like the one our hero was attending. He understood that Lloyd was definitely hiding something from Neo. Our hero was having a pleasant chat with Devon, but still decided to dig deeper into the matter and find out more about everything. She asked if anyone wanted to ask her brother something, and immediately grabbed him by the shirt and told him to come with her to the interrogation room. He screamed, asking Devon to save him because he didn't want to go with her. But even Devon was afraid of Lawler, so she just hid behind the table that had fallen during the drinking. Lawler threw our hero to the ground and asked if he wasn't thinking about the consequences of what he could do while drunk. And basically, he didn't want that to happen again, but the hero raised his voice seriously and asked Loyar if it was really that hard for her to pay the costs of everything that had fallen on her shoulders. Still, he wondered if even if she had kept selling sweets, she wouldn't have made that much money then. Loyar grimaced and said she didn't want to talk about it because she didn't consider it necessary. She didn't even want to hide all that from our hero, so he looked at her immediately and asked if she would really take money from someone by force. Loyar covered her face with her hand and said maybe that was the case, but selling sweets was more like a cover. After all, she admitted that the guys from her clan helped the Thieves Guild with gathering information, but if our hero gave her an order, she would tell him everything right away. Nevertheless, she didn't think it was necessary for him to know all the details. She also told him he should forget about the gang as soon as he entered the temple. Our hero thought that made sense because if he had a talent and got a scholarship, he would have to think about making money with the gang's help. So he didn't keep pressing her with questions, and simply went to sleep because he knew if she was sick, she wouldn't say anything. But the next day, our hero and Devon were sent to the administrative office in the capital to get an ID card. Our hero couldn't believe everything was much simpler than he thought. However, our hero interrupted Devon and said he thought he had seen the temple's reception. Devon thought the place was getting bigger and bigger, but he couldn't understand if there were really that many rich people in the country who wanted to send their kids to study at the temple. But our hero told him not to be so surprised, because they were in a simple consultation office, and if he passed the test there, the results would show exceptional skills. If not, he couldn't get free training. Damon asked if it was really just a place for results. Our hero said yes, but dragged Devon with him, so they arrived at the registration window. The girl asked if they were thinking about enrolling. Damon wanted to say something but couldn't find the words, so our hero decided to do it for him. He said they wanted to pay the fee to join the academy, but the girl smiled and said there were many people like them. She meant those who only wanted to pay for 1 semester of training. Our hero asked if that was okay, but she said guys like them usually borrowed money from others to continue their studies, so to avoid such incidents, they prohibited entry to the academy for those who would only pay for 1 semester. Our hero rubbed his nose and thought that was very sad. He was ready to leave, but Damon started shouting loudly and asked if they couldn't pass the test. He also asked if there was a fee for the test. The girl understood there was nothing to do with people like our hero, so she said it was free. She also said that if they had come, she would try to give them a chance to pass the test. Our hero told her they had wasted their time, but Damon thought it was better to try everything and then say that nothing had happened. The girl gave our hero a sphere. Our hero was worried maybe that sphere would show he was a demon, but he touched it, because he was sure he would use the ring once more and his real identity would be revealed. Our hero noticed the girl's eyes shining. He was about to run away, but she stood up immediately. Damon asked if something was wrong, but she said no. It seemed the machine was defective. Damon asked our hero if it was possible he had a gift, but our hero was sure there was nothing strange. He was even sure he didn't think his true identity had been revealed. She said she would just replace the sphere with a new one. However, he decided to think his stats were much better than the others. At that moment, the girl placed the new orb in front of our hero and said it should work properly. Our hero touched it, but again it behaved strangely. The girl asked him to touch the orb once more, so our hero thought he just had a hidden talent for breaking those magical orbs, but the girl simply shouted. He couldn't believe what he saw on his device. Damon couldn't take his eyes off the crystal, since he couldn't see what the girl saw. She simply said that our hero's potential didn't fit any talents. It wasn't even enough to call him an outstanding genius. But the orb said there was a good chance he would succeed, if he studied hard. They don't admit potential candidates to the academy, but they always show results after the test. She showed the orb to our hero and he saw that he had potential for absolutely everything in the world. So according to the results, our hero could use both holy magic and dark magic. She said it was the first time in the Empire's history. Our hero was perplexed, but Damon shouted with joy and even gave him a slap on the cheek. He said he knew our hero had talent. Our hero was lying back on his scoreboard, thinking he was attracting too much attention. Lawyer was sitting next to him at that moment and asked if he really had unlimited talent, if he really could be the future elite. But our hero understood it wouldn't be as unexpected as it might seem at first. After all, he could choose any path for himself using achievement points. He could even become a skilled archer, mage, archer mage, and more. He could gain talent in any field if he earned enough experience points. That's why they called him a man with unlimited potential. Damon came up behind our hero and asked why he looked so sad. But our hero said he was fine, that he wouldn't be terrified by clubs anymore. However, Damon was probably happier than our hero and took credit for it. He said thanks to him, our hero had learned about his abilities. Our hero should be the one thanking him. But our hero watched all this with a strange expression on his face, because once again the story had surprised him, and he was going to be part of the main plot after starting his studies. However, he understood that at this rate he could be assigned to the royal class. The royal class is a special class of the Temple Academy, exactly the same elite place where every student receives a scholarship and even lives in luxurious dorms with enormous financial support. They can attend any class. They are the ones with the greatest talents in the Empire. During the first semester, our hero could study and gain a lot of experience, but just thinking that someone like him could enter a royal class made our hero uneasy. When he went to her and told her everything, he received advice. She told him this class is the most elite among the others. Our hero wasn't happy about this, so he asked if there was something bothering her. But our hero knew the main character would soon appear in the class, the protagonist of the novel he had created. His name would be Ludwig. The student who had been transferred from Class 1B hated the house because of social ridicule, but throughout the story, he gets closer and closer to his classmates. In other words, Most students in the class are arrogant, nerds with big egos. Our hero asked her if he really should be happy for having unlimited potential or for getting such a high rating, but he thought the burden was too much for him. She looked at him and said he would surely succeed. Our hero remained depressed because the only advantage, he should be happy to have unlimited potential or to get such a high grade, but he thought the burden was too much for him. She looked at him and said he would surely succeed. Our hero was still depressed because the only advantage was that he knew everyone in Class A. So if anything happened, he couldn't survive on unlimited potential alone, but she kept encouraging him, telling him they would do everything possible to help him. She asked if he could leave the campus, to which our hero shook his head but asked why she wanted to send him to the temple. If he really became as omnipotent as Zark wanted, what would happen if our hero changed his mind and started a new war? But she was sure that if he spent enough time in the human world, he would stop hating them. Our hero asked if he could accept that, but she said she would solve all problems as they arose. So at that very moment, with a snap of her fingers, a bag appeared in front of our hero. She said they were his new clothes. Because he not only needed a uniform and gave him her necklace, our hero asked what it was, but she asked if he remembered his nickname, Tuesday. Our hero asked if that was the nickname she gave him when he first arrived at the shop. She answered yes, and also told him that long ago, vampires had 7 clans called the 7 Knights. The Monday and Sunday clans had disappeared many years ago, and their magic had been forgotten along with them. But the other 5 clans continued developing elements according to their names, and also passed on this knowledge from generation to generation. What Haya gave our hero is the treasure of her clan, the symbol of the clan leader, which is the flame of Tuesday. Our hero asked if Haya was the clan leader, but she said it was only possible and wondered why she gave him something so precious. Haya said she did the same as Zark, who gave him the ring of his clan, a very powerful artifact. She also added that this necklace would allow him to use fire magic, depending on his mana reserves. She asked if our hero would like to try it, but Reinhardt's hands were shaking. Could he really use fire magic? He stood up and realized that now he could use what almost everyone on Earth dreams of. He extended his hand and lit it a little. He asked why so little, because even a lighter gives more. But Haya observed all this and said he shouldn't get used to that flame, because the stronger the enmity, the stronger the flame will be. So she hoped Reinhardt understood why she gave him the flame of Tuesday. Our hero thought about it and realized she didn't want him to hurt anyone. She was just trying to protect him. Our hero said thanks, and that he would keep it and try not to use it until graduation. However, our hero returned to the clan settlement, but at that very moment, a bag of gold coins was shoved in his face. He asked Alalar what that was, but she answered that it was his allowance because that money was meant to pay tuition. But since Reinhardt would receive a scholarship, he could use it however he wanted, and unlike her other servants, she could only offer him this. Our hero looked at all this in horror and said he would try not to spend it all on nonsense. Thoughts started crossing his mind that he should sleep more because if he didn't, he would definitely be considered a clown at the academy, and even if he became some ruler in his new kingdom, that disgrace would follow him to the end. But at that moment he got angry and told Alalar that he was no longer a child and that he needed to sleep. Our hero, on the other hand, understood that he had just remembered an important problem. The genre of the Demon King's death is everyday life. He wrote a novel, so calm and light to please those fans who were tired of his tragic and dark endings, but he had no talent for ending stories on a happy note, and quickly ran out of material for the novel, and the plot became completely confusing, so he ended it that way. He understood that in the middle of the story, gates would appear. He knew that in the middle of the story, there would be gates that would open portals to other worlds, leading to the invasion of a whole army of monsters, and that this world would burn in an abyss of pain and suffering. Our hero didn't understand why he was so stupid to create that kind of novel. He thought about it and couldn't calm down and couldn't even sleep. He thought about running away somewhere until the end of the story, but realized that the inhabitants of this world shouldn't have to pay for his foolish behavior. He told himself to pull himself together because it was his fault that everything would be destroyed. So he should take responsibility. He should study at the temple, get stronger and earn experience points. He would use the review to prevent monsters from crossing the gate, or else he would go to battle himself. He was determined that if it was about the destruction of the world or whatever, he wouldn't give up or run away like a coward. So by morning outside the academy, they announced that all the students received their student ID cards, and also an admission letter. Plus they asked the new students of the royal class to go to the dormitory lobby at 1 in the afternoon. Our hero looked around the whole academy and couldn't help but get excited. At first he was surprised by the capitals, but who would have thought that their rough details could assemble something like this, and how much attention they put into it. But when our hero went inside, he understood that everything inside was even more luxurious. However, he couldn't find his room in such a huge place. A girl passing by asked if he was new. Our hero greeted her, and she said she was the head of his class. Her name was Tara. She also asked if our hero could find his room. She asked for his ticket, and told him he should go straight down the hall. To room 11, our hero looked where she pointed, but she said she had to go because if he had heard the announcement, there would be a welcome party for the newcomers at 1 in the afternoon. Attendance would be mandatory since they would explain the rules for the new students there. Our hero thanked her and left immediately while Tara kept calling out to students and saying she would help them with anything. Our hero found his door, and when he put the card on the door, it opened immediately. He was surprised at first, but then understood that almost everything around him, it was magic, so he wasn't even surprised. He went through the door, thinking he would like to see the room for the royal class. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw that the room was simply huge. He even thought the room should have been smaller. He couldn't believe he was in the dorm. He understood that at first. He had been surprised by the capital, by the temple, and then he was surprised by the dorm. But as soon as he finished enjoying all that, he noticed there was a strange gift in his room. He wondered what it could be. But as soon as he opened the gift, he saw a map of the temple, the dormitory rules, a small list of dorm rules, a small snack and a pen with notepads. It was exactly what our hero thought. It was a welcome gift. Our hero lay down and realized that everything was fine, because now he also had time to remember the most important characters, Bertus and Ellen, the Holy Knights. But as soon as he started to remember the students of Class B, all students were asked to gather in the main hall. Our hero couldn't think as the time to leave had come, but when he looked at his book, he saw he could only remember a few characters. But it was these notes that would help him understand who was who. However, when our hero arrived at his destination, he couldn't remember anyone because he could only recognize half, even after preparing his notes. But when he looked up, he saw the superiors. They were the ones with a killer look that told him someone's face needed a brick. So our hero didn't even expect so many people to come to watch them, and as far as he knew, the superiors shouldn't be interested in the freshmen. However, while our hero was standing in place, someone stepped on his foot. He apologized, but our hero, lying on the ground, looked at the boy and asked if he hadn't been taught to watch where he was walking. But the boy asked if our hero was badly hurt. He looked at him and realized it was the same boy, the child who had introduced himself as Ludwig. Our hero and he met and shook hands. Ludwig had noticed that everyone was getting ready, so he realized that everything seemed to start right then. Our hero saw the protagonist of his story. Ludwig finally understood he was in his own novel. The girl was organizing a party, so she asked everyone to sit in the chairs. In the center of the lobby at that moment, our hero didn't understand why there should be 10 people in Class 1B, but saw 11. However, it was impossible to believe that Reinhardt was the last in Class A. Our hero had imagined there would be too much attention on him, and everyone knew there couldn't be another scenario. However, it would have been much easier if he had been in Class 1B. But while our hero was getting very excited at that moment, Bertus Cartia was introduced. Our hero didn't understand why, in his novel, he would have to enter under a false identity. Then the other class members began to introduce themselves. At that moment when our hero introduced himself, someone was watching him intensely. No one could understand how he had gotten to them just by his infinite talent. But our hero had heard whispers about him. Even after his introduction, he felt a little uncomfortable. But at that moment he noticed there was someone else who had been added to the class. Charlotte Cartias had been added. She definitely shouldn't be with them. The temple is not subject to external power structures as proof. Besides Bertus and Charlotte, there are no members of the imperial family in the king's class. This only means that even the imperial family cannot enter the temple without proven and appropriate talent. However, if the first prince, Bertum, graduates from the academy with honors, this fact alone grants him tremendous power in the future, becoming the unrevealed villain of his novel by entering the royal class. As his first step to fulfilling his selfish ambitions, both entered the royal class in the same year of study. This certainly was not the case in his novel. Our hero thought so, since he believed the course of history had changed, because originally he and the princess were supposed to die together. But Bertus would also have to hide his true identity. However, in his world, he revealed it from the start. So if all this is part of his plan, even our hero feels uncomfortable with it. In the novel, Bertus awakens 3 abilities after the Duke. Solarian invests a large amount of money in him, thanks to tremendous effort. The Empire developed the necessary talents to make their chosen one the best of the best. However, if he lacks at least one of them, he will not obtain the title of hero. After meeting the conditions, Bertus becomes the Empire's greatest dream master. So our hero thought it was unlikely, that the differences with the novel were too huge. But now he was more worried about the first princess, Charlotte Cartius. He couldn't imagine that both were in the royal class. But when he looked at her, he noticed she was first in Class B, not in Class A. If she couldn't get into one class, our hero feared to imagine what could have happened if they had been in the same class. He even wondered if the teachers were upset that the royal class was the first time members of the imperial family were accepted. But while our hero reflected, the introduction had already ended, and everyone began to listen because of the royal class rules. They were about to be announced in the royal class, as well as in the temple itself. All students are on equal footing. The difference lies in the classes, high and low. Whether you are a commoner or a noble, there is no difference for them. It is well known that the temple could not function normally if there were disputes about which family would have more power. If you decide to impose your status on others, you will immediately receive a reprimand from the student council president. If you have many marks on your record, a pedagogical council will be appointed, and after making a decision on discipline, all students must prepare for expulsion. Also, the temple received a letter from the imperial palace. He began to read it, where it said that from the moment the letter became public regarding the territory of the temple and beyond, if Charlotte Cartius was harmed, regardless of the severity, the other party would be permanently deprived of the right to the throne. She showed this letter to the others, and told them it was an order from His Majesty Emperor Nayad Cartius. Our hero understood that this concerned not only Charlotte and Bertus, but was a message for all followers both inside and outside the temple. In other words, the emperor was trying to say they should take care of each other's lives, or end up with nothing. Our hero knew that finally, the time would come when Bertus and Charlotte would not be at each other's throats. Our hero left the hall and noticed that one of the students was trying to talk to Prince Bertus, but our hero had noticed he was trying to flatter him by putting on a sweet face. With almost everyone he spoke to, he said it wasn't necessary to call him Majesty, because then one of them would surely get a reprimand. The student laughed but was embarrassed. However, our hero understood that Bertus was a true expert in this matter. Bertus had been in contact with a boy from the northeast of Fide, but our hero still thought Bertus was a vain fox because as soon as he appeared at the academy, he had already started listening to someone. Curtis immediately apologized to his interlocutor and approached the girl. Our hero didn't understand what had just happened, but Bertus continued talking to the black-haired girl, asking her not to be angry, because he just wanted to get to know all his classmates. He also told her that apparently she should also be one, but apparently the administration had been too cautious. Our hero recalled that she was probably Helen from Class A2. She brushed her hair back and said she didn't care about those things. Our hero remembered that in the king's class originally, she was A1 but was transferred to Class A2 because of Bertus. She didn't spread it around but had a vengeful talent that surpassed even that of A1. She also had another real name, Artoria, a close word with a similar meaning to hero Arthur, the hero who overthrew the demon king and sacrificed his life. Helen is the younger sister of Regan Artorius. Our hero was distracted by the protagonist of his story while thinking and called everyone's attention. He also wanted to wish everyone a good time, but at that moment, everyone looked at him as if he were an idiot. Everyone looked at him with a very strange expression, and our hero understood that the welcome party was in full swing. Our hero understood that the protagonist of his story had left a bad impression of himself, trying to talk to the class, but when he realized no one would respond, Ludwig approached him directly and said he hadn't seen him in a long time. He even remembered our hero's name, Ryan Hart, and extended his hand, asking them to be kind to each other. However, the girl sitting in the armchair noticed this scene. She didn't like what was happening, but couldn't exactly explain what she didn't like. Ludwig wanted to approach her to greet her, but she left immediately. He asked her to stay because they were in an A-class block. However, she said she was sure that only complete fools from the B-class would gather in their block. However, right behind Ludwig appeared Bertus, who said Harriet was overreacting seeing the prince. She immediately got scared, and our hero remembered who Harriet was. He remembered she was the daughter of the Duke of St. Owen with great talent for magic. He shouldn't make a fool of himself in front of the prince. But Bertus kept ignoring Harriet, and turned back to Ludwig, apologizing for the circus they had been putting on, since there simply weren't many sensitive people there, and Ludwig should have understood that. However, he told him that if he had something to say, he would have to use the Bieber, but how he would do that would soon be seen. At that moment, the viticulturist was beaming with joy. He just insanely liked the prince. Our hero, while watching this pitiful scene again, received a message that he had gained experience points. He saw he had received 100 points just for putting Ludwig in his place. However, as soon as our hero decided to see what he could spend his points on, he realized he simply couldn't get more. And besides, the prices were incredibly high, so our hero decided to check the subsections where superpowers were. He understood he would like to buy a talent for magic, but he was still far from that. However, in the early stages, his superpowers would be terribly weak, hard to control, and would require regular training, so he decided to keep saving more experience points. Before choosing and obtaining a superpower, our hero would make a decision after observing the academy a bit more. Even though the royal class introduction ceremony was held separately, the whole process was quite simple. The principal introduced each class to their homeroom teacher, and then they were taken to a private classroom building, near the dorm. Reinhardt thought there was nothing special about the ceremony, so did that mean neither the prince nor the princess would do anything to each other? However, our hero was seen looking out the window. The teacher asked him not to get distracted. At that same moment, the homeroom teacher, whose name was Panauser, said that on Mondays and Thursdays they would have a common class, and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, they would have a class they had previously enrolled in, and named Bertus as leader, so team management and suggestions had to be made through him. He also said that if they wanted to change the leader, it would be necessary to discuss it with the class and then inform the teacher everything that needed to be known by the class, which the teacher would pass on through Bertus. But there was one exception. He said they would have to speak directly with him if they witnessed a fight. He asked them not to allow students to kill each other, but mentioned there were still cases where they were defenseless. He simply asked what skills their classmates had, but one of the students asked what the teacher would do if he had to intervene. The teacher began to say that in the temple, everyone is treated in a special way, but although they are of great value to the empire, they can also be just as dangerous to others, so he asked if they hadn't been warned. During the performance, the students were very surprised. Then the teacher made a bloodthirsty face and said that, simply put, as head of the royal class, he had every right to punish immediately the students who received special treatment. The class was astonished, but one of the smart kids asked if a person like their teacher could do that. However, the teacher was too calm and confident. He said he was the best at his role because he had been doing it for more than 10 years, so he asked everyone to take his words seriously. Our hero was sitting and couldn't understand, but the master paused for a long time and asked Reinhardt to come out with him. Our hero was puzzled, but as soon as our hero, Reinhardt, and his master went to a specially designated area, the master told our hero he had infinite potential but no talent. The master asked him to look at the sheet where the superpowers were written. He said they would receive new abilities that would be stronger than others. After all, they had clear ways to develop their skills, but looking at our hero, he said he had potential in all fields, but probably couldn't decide which field he would like to develop in. Our hero didn't understand, but the master continued saying that sometimes it happens that someone's potential and talents differ from what they want to do. He had seen it many times, but unlike them, our hero has the advantage of being able to choose any field. However, our hero had decided a long time ago that he wanted to learn superpowers. The master looked at him and said he had potential in everything, but that his superpowers were included in that. Our hero said it was more likely because he had unlimited potential. Our hero mentioned superpowers because they are cheap and he didn't like the master's reaction to his words. However, the master, looking at our hero's file, said that the temple's rules do not allow students without the right talent to attend superpower classes. However, for the real class, it's a bit different. Then the master warned that Reinhardt could be expelled from the class if he didn't perform well. The master said our hero would only have one discipline at a time. He gave him a schedule and told him not to ask to change it. He also warned that it would be difficult to obtain and learn skills only through effort, so our hero shouldn't be afraid to try other areas. Our hero even blushed hearing these words but thanked him for such kind words. Our hero entered the classroom thinking the master was much better than he had imagined, but upon entering the classroom, he didn't understand why everyone was looking at him as if he had something on his face. But when he turned around, he noticed the student who was laughing and asked if our hero had any talent. Our hero didn't see anything strange, so he answered yes. But the students started shouting, how could he do that? He really had no shame. They even said his class was for the most gifted. However, our hero just told him to shut up, which immediately put the student in his place. The student asked how he dared, but our hero didn't understand why he was angry at him and started throwing a series of overwhelming questions. The student began to stutter, not knowing what to answer, but our hero kept pressing him. The student replied that he wasn't better than the committee, so our Hiro approached him with an angry expression and asked why he had opened his vile mouth. After all, if he looked at him, he could immediately understand that he simply had a large amount of mana, but no talent for magic. At that moment, student number 10 was already sitting on the floor, almost crying. But our hero put his hand on his head and advised him to face those kinds of things only if he was worth something. The whole class was in shock. They even called our hero a low-level master, and our hero just thought he had messed up, because not only did he have no talent, but now people were starting to think he couldn't control his anger. But looking ahead, our hero saw that Bertus was watching him and wondered if he was plotting something, which certainly terrified him. When everyone was eating in the cafeteria, our hero couldn't calm down, all because of that same look in class. He blamed himself, for getting into a conflict with Kai. Everyone was sitting in class, but only from the protagonist's side was there an aura, ominous, that didn't calm the other students. But in Class B, on the contrary, the atmosphere was completely different. Our hero sat alone while Bertie kept making contact with all the other students in his class. Everyone liked him, but our hero decided to look toward the other desk, where Charlotte Ludwig was sitting. He made eye contact with her and asked her to eat no more and wanted to improve, but it wasn't in vain that our hero had gotten upset as well after all. At this rate, even Charlotte would faint from eating so much, so he realized that introverts like him shouldn't worry about extroverted people. Then came the general training, where the teacher asked them to give their all in training, without falling behind. After all, they were no longer in elementary school, so if they wanted to cry, it would be better to pack up and leave the temple quickly. Our hero didn't like being assigned 20 laps immediately after eating, but the teacher continued, saying they should always be in excellent shape, whether they wanted to be sword mages or archers. After all, if they didn't meet the Empire's standards, they were finished. He just wanted everyone to know that the girl from class number 3 was already exhausted, and he didn't understand why she, being a mage, should be like that. But the teacher had bloodthirsty eyes, started chasing her, and said that if she was really tired, she would die right then, when she was at death's door. So if it were a real fight, she'd surely die. The teacher scared her but kept up the pace. Even when she said she would keep running, our hero was called by Ludwig, who didn't even seem tired after 20 laps, and asked him to continue. But our hero definitely wasn't in condition to keep going. He thought it was very hard to make friends with people as energetic as Ludwig, and wondered if it would really be like this all semester. But while our hero was thinking that, at that very moment, he was overtaken. Ludwig understood that everything was like in the novel, but of course, after running, there were other exercises like the bench press. Our hero struggled a lot and felt like he was in the army. But the strangest thing was that Charlotte hadn't practiced, because she hadn't fully recovered yet. However, while resting, she noticed that the teacher was making those who didn't want to continue run 10 more laps, so she kept going with the exercise. When everyone reached the same training session, our hero was completely exhausted, but also heard that the same would happen on Thursday. While thinking about that, the same boy from his class approached him and said that our hero wasn't in good shape. But our hero didn't care while getting dressed. This boy asked why. If that was the case, he acted like a tough guy. Reinhardt didn't understand, because the boy had been the one to approach him, but at that moment, the boy opened his arms and pushed Reinhardt. Everyone saw it, and our hero asked him to stop. The boy felt strong and started saying unpleasant things again, but our hero grabbed him by the neck and asked if he was that stupid. Then he immediately punched him in the face. All the students started approaching our hero, and wanted to separate them as quickly as possible. They separated them, but our hero asked them not to say that again. The other boy also stayed in the same mood, wanting to kill him, but they managed to send them to the teacher. The teacher looked at them and asked what had motivated them to start a fight. On the first day of classes, the student who had gotten away said that our hero had hit him first and also said he had cursed him since the morning. Our hero remained silent. It was true they had fought, but he didn't understand how the teacher had appeared so quickly. Definitely. He thought it was the work of one of the rats from Class B, Luis, but the master asked him to keep quiet, since he hadn't even been asked yet. At that moment, they asked the hero if he really had hit first, to which he answered, yes, he really had hit first. But at that moment, our hero confessed that Kyra had said things that belittled the temple's reputation. At that moment, he got nervous, and the master asked our hero what he had said and when he had said it. But the master, he was very interested in what our hero had said, so he asked for more details. Exactly at that moment, our hero began to explain, saying that Kyra had repeatedly said that the admissions committee was not doing its job properly. Therefore, our hero He had to tell him that a student had no right to criticize the decisions made by the temple. Our hero showed regret and said he had overreacted because he was very angry, saying that the temple's authority was being undermined because of him. But he also added that Kyra wanted to humiliate him for his lack of physical ability. However, Kyra again said that it was our hero who attacked first, but the master asked them both to stop, asking our hero to explain himself once more, since he didn't understand our hero's point. The protagonist began to cry, and while crying in front of the whole class, he said that Kyra had fallen into a trap. Our hero could endure his taunts, but he had invaded the sanctity of the temple. Our hero knew that would work because he himself had created the story. At that moment, Kyra's atmosphere grew darker and darker. With just one look at his master, he began to tremble. And our hero finished his speech, saying that he considered it an insult to the Empire Guard, apologized for his clumsiness since he couldn't control his anger. And our hero only understood that his master had one trait he could use to his advantage, and that trait was called patriotism. At that very moment, the master asked Kyra with the most evil eyes if it was true. Kyra immediately backed down because he was scared, and the master kept asking him over and over. He also asked how a common student dared to accuse the temple of corruption. Kyra was very quiet, and the master only wanted one answer: yes or no. According to our hero, his master was a patriot, with an incredibly strong sense of pride for the Empire Guard and the temple. That's why he despised everything that discredited them. However, at the same time, he was very fair with all his students and perfectly understood that Kyra had said too much without thinking, and that our hero had also exaggerated. At that moment, the master only asked Kyra to stay, but our hero asked to go to class. As soon as he sat at his desk and felt all the eyes on him, he realized that rumors would spread in both real classes about him being a talentless and terribly aggressive student. However, while our hero looked out the window, he received a new achievement for fighting, which gave him another 200 experience points. He even decided to cheer himself up and said that now with those 200 points, he wouldn't have to do another task to bite the prince. However, at that very moment, he received a new task that consisted of getting the highest score on the midterm exam. He even thought that if he got 4,000 points, he could break Ellen's and Ludwig's legs. He began to think he couldn't do any of the tasks, but at that moment, he received the task of declaring his love to someone. He was upset, but more and more tasks kept coming, all following the exception, or they were simply impossible to complete. But at that very moment, while our hero was thinking about this, Kyrie and her master entered the classroom. The master asked for silence, so our hero decided to look at his face, and realized that he definitely wouldn't do it again. As soon as everything was settled, the master asked the class president to collect the registration forms. However, he also said that if anyone was unsure, they could stay there. Those who had already decided could leave, but no one was to ask the dorm leader if they wanted to leave the temple. All the disciples began to leave the classroom. They decided to leave, and some just wanted to sleep because their duties had exhausted them. Our hero, who also stayed in class, noticed that more than half of them couldn't decide where they wanted to go. Our hero heard a voice in the hallway, but realized it was Eric, and even knew why he was so angry. He went out the door and saw the same boy staring at the red-haired girl. He didn't like that she was getting in his way. Our hero understood it was impossible not to notice a girl like her. Her name was Scarlet, a symbol of bad luck. He shouted at her to get out of his sight, but she was still lying on the ground defenseless. Our hero remembered that in the novel, he had made everyone mock her because of her red hair. Because according to Larissa, the color red used to be a symbol of bravery and courage, but then it started to be considered a symbol of bad luck since the demon Ark had red eyes and hair. That's why her own parents had abandoned her, and she had to live on the streets. Unlike him, now she endured all the mockery, because without the temple, she had nowhere else to go. Our hero wondered if it was possible that they bothered and hurt her just because of her hair color, but he saw she was friends with Ludwig, and that the teasing was minor. At that moment, our hero realized it was the right time to choose his first talent. He looked at the list and couldn't think of what to pick, but at one point he saw a talent he had discarded in his novel. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, but even when he was lying in bed, he couldn't imagine that his talent was self-hypnosis instead. After all, he had dropped it for one reason only. He thought it was too much to enchant himself and do anything, since there was a skill that had never been added to the novel, and that surely could have meant something. He wondered if someone had recycled it and decided to give it new life, but still, it sounded like a cheating skill. He decided to buy it because it didn't cost that much, and probably that's why it hadn't been planned in the first place. He decided to check his status. but a strange symbol still appeared. He saw that his new skill was locked. He thought he had been scammed, that he had been tricked again for points. He was furious because he understood that even most people, with the awakening of superpowers, activated their power immediately. But sometimes, very rarely, people had this skill in hibernation mode. In other words, our hero had just bought an inactive skill. He looked at the leaderboard and saw that the prices of other skills had also gone up. He was suspicious, since everything obeyed the mechanics of his novel. Something very terrible must have happened. For the skill to have been activated, or could have been forcibly awakened. He was also disappointed because now he didn't have any receipt to buy anything else. And the only way he could do it was simply by earning more experience points. Cornering himself and awakening the skill at the critical moment, he knew the important thing was to save points to buy now. He looked at all the options to earn experience points, but his pride wouldn't let him, because he couldn't write a letter of recognition. However, he decided to get it. Recognition for 1,000 experience points. The action moves to the main street of the temple, which is inside a huge educational complex that includes not only the academy building, but also houses a large number of ordinary citizens. The existence of the commercial area is justified. Restaurants, cafes, clothing stores, arcades. It was a lively place to be, so the temple disciples spent most of their time there. There were a lot of people. So Kaya was sitting there in the restaurant. Everyone was happy. But they don't tell us that Kano and Kaya are commoners, while Eric is of noble birth. They tried to cheer him up, but he was the one who was too sad. He tried to distract himself all the time. However, the protagonist knew that these three shouldn't have become friends so quickly. But they got too close, and the reason was our hero, who on the first day cursed like a shoemaker and hit his classmate. They always asked why he hadn't been scolded, but Kar said that all our hero had said at that moment was that Care had insulted the temple or something like that, but his friend didn't understand how he could do that, because it was our hero who had made a fool of himself in front of the whole class when entering the temple without a single talent. And our hero was angry because they were the ones who had approached quickly, and it was Care who wanted to wipe him off the face of the earth no matter what. But at that moment, one of his friends said, "Don't you think the girls in the class are too pretty?" Another guy even spat out all his coffee and asked them never to say such things in front of the girls because it was simply impossible to look at the girls in their class if they were in the outside world and not in the academy. However, they still asked who was the most attractive girl in the class, but they were immediately told to calm down. Because the princess definitely wasn't their type, they talked about number 2. But many said they were scared they were talking about beauty. So then it was Lady Grange, but another girl approached the boys. They got scared because they hadn't heard them talking about the girls from the royal class. But it turned out to be just Araguar, who had changed clothes, and asked them to steal the blue-haired guy for a minute. He was immediately surprised. He was so surprised that steam even came out all of his ears. She asked him to go outside just to talk. While his friends remained on the sidelines puzzled, she gave him a note, saying she was in love with him. She had seen him on the street but didn't know his name. So she asked to meet him sometime. He blushed and said he could because he didn't even have anyone. She told him they should see each other again and started to walk away. But that guy couldn't get out of the shock, and his friends watching him couldn't believe it. In fact, they should do some exercise, because their friend had managed to get the girl, and when it ended, we understood that it wasn't even Eller, but our hero who had just made a disguise. He didn't understand how he had gotten to this, because he had just sold his soul for 1,000 experience points. However, he realized that nowhere did it specify that he had to get this achievement while in disguise. However, at the same time, the game said that from that moment, he would have to do everything, as he thought the game would update. At the same time, he thought it would, so the game gave him a new task. Go on a date with Kano pretending to be a girl. Our hero was angry, because he thought the game was watching him all the time, but he also realized it was very easy to fall in love with an innocent teenager, so it wasn't the right time to think about that. He thought it was time to buy talent for 1,000 points, and that the remaining tests, like skipping classes, could lead to punishment. The only proof for which he wouldn't be punished but would burn with shame was that, but our hero didn't understand what was stopping him this time, because he had already sold his soul once. So why shouldn't he repeat his experience after a short time? Our hero was at the temple door and accepted the fact that he would have to sell not only his soul but also his dignity. But he had to gather 1,000 points as fast as possible to find and buy a new talent. He had also thought everything through, and carefully chose his target to minimize all the risks of being humiliated. Not even a rumor would spread if he was rejected, because he was sure that person didn't care about him. It was Helen Artorias from 2. At that moment, Helen was practicing, and our hero approached and called her. He decided that if he confessed, she would surely kill him with her sword. However, he understood it was all for experience points. So right then, he said he had described all his feelings in that letter he held in his hand. He gave her the letter and she immediately replied no. He had received his 200 points. And he exhaled because everything had happened exactly as he had supposed, but he still hoped not to have to meet her in the near future. The next day, our hero had a lesson in sword handling. They were always scolded, but our hero had other things on his mind. He was close to Ellen, although he prayed his fate wouldn't make him meet her. Not even with a glance. But there was a plus. He didn't care because even before that he hadn't paid attention to her. During the lessons on sword handling theory, and our hero made sure everything was for the sake of the task even though he felt very embarrassed. He was simply embarrassed to be near her, and to make things worse. The class and practice on the bearer said our hero was too relaxed, as if he dared to float among the clouds while our hero thought about all this. His master approached him, and began to rush him in every possible way. And there was another master praising him, seeing in him the best student. He noticed his beautiful posture, but our hero continued with all the other instructions. They asked if our hero was also from the royal class, although our hero was very annoyed by this question. After all, it was the master who had taken attendance. At that moment he laughed a lot and proposed a fight. Among all the students of the royal class, not everyone was against the idea. However, it was our hero who was shattered. All the students were happy to see such a show, because it would be the elite students who would fight, but our hero understood it was him who they would take down in less than a second. So he stopped putting hope in the fight. The master asked everyone to prepare, and at that moment the fight began. Our hero didn't understand why everything was so easy, but at that very moment he couldn't see Ellen, and the next second, she was behind him and landed a direct hit on his head. He flew backward, and our hero thought it was over, because he had confessed. Our hero woke up in the hospital bed and saw him, in front of him, who told him he had woken up at the end of the lesson, so he had taken him to the infirmary. Our hero wanted to get up and leave, but he had lifted him and said he would help him. She told him that if our hero had deflected her blow, she would have let the sword slip before stabbing it in his neck. She didn't even know that our hero couldn't use a sword. Our hero didn't understand if he really did it all out of guilt, but he told her he would leave on his own. Although she also offered to have lunch with him, our hero understood it wasn't his fault, since he hadn't knocked himself out, but it had been Helen. To his surprise, she accepted, so he wondered if she should be punished for hitting him on the head. Our hero was laughing inside, but knew that, considering the fact that in the temple, there were students from all over the continent. There were many restaurants with different cuisines. They also came from a region called the East, in a part of the world he didn't know. However, it was almost the same as East Asia on Earth, and one of the most typical dishes of that cuisine was sanhang. Our hero was glad to have remembered that place while he was there, so he suggested to her to try it, and asked her to open her mouth to feed her with the spoon. But she immediately started mocking because it wasn't very tasty. However, it was our hero who added fuel to the fire by asking if she would give her life for such a delicious soup. But our hero just laughed to himself because he thought the very image of reserved and calm beauty would crumble instantly, reduced to dust. But Ellen just asked why that soup smelled so bad. Our hero told her as if talking to himself. He asked her to behave modestly, but he was just happy, because he had managed to teach her a lesson. He even wanted to try that dish, because finally, after a long time, he was going to be able to eat something native to the world, so he started adding everything to it. But at that moment he saw how Ellen kept eating the soup. He wanted to laugh because she was so hungry that she was willing to choke on that dish. He asked if she was really still eating it, but to his surprise, she ate it, although she admitted she would never eat it again in her life. The next day, in magic theory class, the teacher tried to explain to everyone how to use it correctly, but our hero didn't understand anything and simply left the class. In the magic perception lesson, they asked him to become one with the universe, but our hero was just sleeping. Even he was surprised by that. The next lesson was about superpower control. They were taking attendance, but our hero was already very tired of all the lessons. He even ran into someone he didn't want to meet anywhere else, that is, Charlotte. Everyone was trying to use their ability, some of which were even admired by the teacher. But our hero just sat on the bench. He saw that Charlotte had awakened a superpower, and not all the teachers knew because as soon as the lesson started, she went with the trainer for individual classes. However, he wondered if the others were simply forbidden to know about this ability. It was possible she had joined the temple by inventing an ability she didn't have. He even tried to find out if Birdie knew about her ability because there was something there that Birdie couldn't know for sure after all. If he was so calm, he should have let them know that Charlotte had nothing supernatural. Our hero certainly didn't believe that Birdie wouldn't do anything if he knew the princess had none of that. The other teacher asked our hero what he could do about it. But our hero only asked to be put in danger but not killed. But his teacher just said he shouldn't ask him to do that because even if it were so, There were people with powers everywhere. But the teacher's side said that even if she allowed him to attend such classes, at that pace he wouldn't achieve anything. Our hero was walking down the hallway when a black-haired boy who had stared at him intently the day before approached and asked if the temple was a joke to him. Our hero didn't understand anything, so the boy asked again what he was doing in classes to control his powers, but our hero didn't have any. Our hero just said he would awaken them, but the boy continued, saying that if our protagonist has unlimited potential, that doesn't mean all doors are open to do whatever he wants. Our hero tried to justify himself, but the boy, he simply turned around and said he would crush him if he showed up in his class again. However, our hero decided to show his true face once again. He said that guy couldn't even fry potatoes. The boy got angry and attacked our hero, but he kept throwing insults. Our hero said his skill was useless, because even a lighter was more dangerous than his sparks. The boy was about to say he came from someone's first dynasty, but our hero stared at him with his index finger and made a smirk like a cheerful, playful man. He asked him to apologize because he couldn't use the stars of his status, or else he would report him to the teacher's council. He would report him to all the teachers if he didn't apologize. Within 3 seconds, our hero started counting to 3, and all the other students began to watch with horror on their faces. When our hero reached 3, the boy started casting magic, but instead of backing away or running, our hero just stepped forward and punched him. The boy started asking what he was doing, but he replied it was just self-defense. But of course, the boy didn't like it and started lighting fire again. But our hero hit him again, repeating that he would do it every time he aimed at him, and that he wouldn't tell the teachers he tried to use magic on him because he wasn't stupid.